Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. With me today is Tony Gavin, and I'm so pleased to have Tony Gavin back on here from Osgo Healthcare because Tony was my first official guest ever on the Podiatry Legends podcast back on episode 2. So, Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm really well, thank you. And thank you so much for having me back. So I was your first guest, wasn't I? Which is what we were just saying, weren't we? 6 years ago, which is unbelievable. 6 years. I'm not sure where it's gone.
I know. And what's funny is I remember I did the first episode, I just did a solo one just to introduce what the podcast was all about. And yeah, you were the first official guest that I organised. Must admit, nervous as hell when I first did it. I was like, oh my God, I've got my first guest on here. Don't really know you. I'm not sure what we're going to be talking about. Knew you from Osgo Healthcare. And then it just all flowed. I can't believe, almost 6 years ago. So time flies.
It does. And your show's doing brilliant. So congratulations on that, because these things don't happen by accident, do they? You've had some brilliant guests on and enormous coverage as well, and still going 6 years later. So that's testament in itself, isn't it? Well done.
Yeah, a good part about the show, I always say, it's the guests that have made the show what it is. Because if it was just me raving on every week, I don't know, there'd be a few people that sort of tune in. But I think that having the variety of guests and then also bringing some people who aren't podiatrists, bringing them in just to give us some advice, because I think it's really important to learn outside of your industry. Don't just have blinkers on that it's just all. So I think it's the combination of guests, throwing in my own comments, and we all have a bit of fun as well. We don't take it too serious.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good point what you say about looking outside of podiatry, because there is so much within podiatry itself. There's so many things which are mimicked in other professions and even other walks of life, not even like professional things, that we can learn so much from and grow ourselves really. As because podiatry it's unusual in that we do so many different things compared to most professions. That the variety of things that we do it's so wide, isn't it? And the opportunities for us are so much wider than most other professions as well. That we have to look outside a lot, don't we? Even though we've got some incredible talent in the profession, and some people have done some amazing things, we have to remember to keep looking outside too, don't we?
Yeah, well, the good part, I think, with podiatry too is it's so varied in what we do, but we can also pick only certain areas of that, and you can run a full-blown business just in certain areas and not do other things, but have the ability to refer to another podiatry friend who does those things that you don't want to do, and they can do the same thing back. Like my brother's a dentist, so they do general dentistry, but a lot of the specialized things you had to go and do a lot of additional training with. Whereas in podiatry, we're given all the basics, and you can pick up a lot of these other skills just by having an interest in that area, going to a few courses, and then you can make that your focus without actually having a specialization.
Yes. And what's the reason for that? And I think it is because the demand for our services, because we are such a niche profession, isn't it? That's what gives us the flexibility. And I think that's quite often missed. I know certainly when I think back to when I was first opening a clinic, is the drive is to be all things to all people, which you can't do.
True.
And it's a shortcut to making yourself miserable, isn't it? Doing things that you actually don't want to be doing as well. And then wondering why you're unhappy and it isn't fulfilling you as you want it to be. And I think it's very easy to get stuck in that trap. And you could probably spend 30, 40 years in that trap of doing things you don't want to be doing, which is crazy, isn't it? Because we do only get one go, don't we, at this life? And to spend a huge portion of it doing things that you don't want to do is probably not a good idea, is it? Especially when you can really push down the roots of stuff that does interest you or really fulfills you or brings you joy in some way or other. Then we're very fortunate in this profession that we can do that.
Yeah, it's funny. I stumbled into choosing what I wanted to do accidentally. And the first part was when I went through university, I knew straight away I didn't like ulcers. First time I saw one, I went, I dry reached. The smell killed me. So I just knew wounds I could not handle. So as soon as I graduated and I started working, from day dot, I said, I'm never treating a wound or an ulcer. And if it comes into the clinic, I'll be telling you, don't even take your dressing off. I'll tell you where to go. And I'll not tell them where to go, but I'll tell them where to go. And I did that from day dot. But it wasn't until about probably 10, 15 years into my career that I realized, well, hang on, if I could do that with ulcers, I can do that with other things that I really don't want to do, or a type of patient I don't want to treat, or some form of government funding. I thought, no, I don't want to treat those patients. I'll let somebody else do that. it took a while for it to sink in that you have the choice on setting your business up the way that you want to set it up. And happiness is if you want to be happy in the profession long term, you've got to be doing more of what you like and less of what you don't like.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of it comes to, I think about this a little bit sometimes, expectations, because I think we all have expectations placed on us by others, don't we? But we also have these unspoken expectations we put on ourselves of what we should do. And I think that can guide a lot of things, can't it? And spending a bit of time challenging those things and thinking, actually, should I really? Should I? Is this going to get me where I want to be? Is it the best thing for these people? Because it's not just what things you're going to treat in practice, but generally in life. If you're doing something because there's an internal should, is that really fair to the person that you're doing that service or that thing for? If you're doing something that's some kind of internal obligation rather than something you're passionate about and could do your best when perhaps someone else could fill that gap way better than you can. But yeah, it's hard to see that first because I think certainly early career, there's lots of these things you impose on yourself and you think that, well, I think I certainly did anyway. Work ethic was about doing things that you didn't want to do. And I realized that you do have to power through and have resilience with things. But as time moves on, you have to question these things and think, actually, what's my time best spent doing? How am I going to move the needle most for other people, for my business, for myself, for people around me? And they're hard questions to have because with yourself anyway, because a lot of these expectations you place on yourself, they're hidden, aren't they? They're not obvious to you. And it's like you just said, then, oh, the penny dropped. I didn't have to do that. And it wasn't like you'd been telling yourself, this is an expectation I've got you. It's something internal, isn't it?
I saw a speaker once from the United States, and he said a lot of people go, oh, I should do this. I should do that. I should be doing this over here. I should do that. He said, and eventually they end up just shooting all over themselves. And when you're covered in should, he said, it's never pretty. He said, so stop doing that. Just do what you want to do. And I was talking to a coaching client recently, and I asked them, how would you like to see your practice in so many years' time? And they told me what they wanted to see. And I went, okay. I said, is that what you really want to see? Or is that an expectation of what you think is expected of you? Because they were telling me about the type of patients they want to see. And I went, oh, that confused me that you want to see that many of that type of patient. I went, oh, well, and I could tell in the voice that as a podiatrist, this is what it's expected of me, that I should be seeing these sort of patients, or at least this percentage of those sort of patients. And once again, it comes back, they end up shooting on themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we do it all the time, don't we? We end up in these kind of patterns of behavior, don't we? It's hard on your own to take a step out of those things. And you normally need someone to hold a bit of a mirror up, don't you? And say, look at that, what you're doing. Sometimes you can get there on your own, but it's useful when someone else sees it, isn't it, from the outside?
Yeah, I think that's what I enjoy about the coaching side of things is sometimes it's no different. I saw a good analogy the other day, and is that, you've got the football team, you've got the players on the team, and they're all just doing their job. And they're out there just doing what they should be doing. And they're almost like the employees in a business. They are doing what it's just meant to be doing. Then you have the captain of the team, which is like the business owner. And the captain of the team is also playing the game, but at the same time is thinking about the game plan and what should be happening. But then you have the coach of the team, which is almost like a business coach. And they're sitting back because they can see things that the captain can't see because they're too involved in the game, which is why good teams have coaches, why a lot of good businesses have business coaches, because they're there to help the business owner or the captain get more done from the actual team itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, when you're chopping down trees in the jungle, you can't see more than 6 feet in front of you, can you? And that's what you're doing when you're working day to day, isn't it? It's just things coming at you all of the time. It's really hard to change perspectives and views, particularly when you're stressed, particularly when you're busy, particularly when you've got a load of shoulds from yourself, other people as well.
And my desk is covered in shoulds.
Covered in shoulds.
Shoulds everywhere.
And it's, I don't know, what is it? Is it a discipline to take some time to take that step back? Is it an exercise to do things with different people who experience it? It's probably a mixture of all of them, isn't it? And I think the more you do those things, the more inclined you are to continue doing and seeking out ways of doing that as well when you're guiding your life. Because it's interesting, isn't it? If you think about careers, you can really easily go into your career, just put your head down and just carry on working and never really genuinely consider it from an external viewpoint, because some stuff will keep coming at you and keep you occupied running your own practice or whatever it may be. It's plausible. You could see how that could happen without taking that kind of different view on it, a helicopter view almost. I hate that phrase, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just like from the top, actually, what is really happening here.
Yeah. Like you said, it's blocking at the time. It's no different if somebody said, oh, I want to take a 2 week holiday. Well, the only
Yeah.
way they get a 2 week holiday is they go to the diary, they plan ahead, they block out the 2 weeks, and then everything else falls around before and after that 2 week holiday. If they just waited and said, I'm just going to wait until 2 weeks free up,
Yeah.
and then I'll take the 2 weeks, they will never, ever have a holiday their whole life, because something will always fill it up. And I think it's the same thing. If there's certain things in your business that you don't want to do, then you've just got to block it out that you're not doing it, and everything else will fall in around it. And I think it comes back to that, like, abundance and scarcity mindset. They're scared, oh, if I let these patients go, I won't make that $500. But they don't realize, but you'll fill it up with $1,000 patient instead.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to talk about kind of abundance and scarcity, because I think where the imbalance is there's this fear of, there's a scarcity mindset which drives that kind of behavior, fear of when's the money coming in, or when's the work going to come, or reputational stuff. But it's worth applying that mindset to how abundant is your own resource and your own flexibility. Are you willing to just stretch that forever? Are you willing to accommodate into everyone else's needs and whims and forgo your own holidays and time off and time to plan your career and plan your business? So it's interesting that gets put upside down, and it's almost like people think there's an abundance of themselves because you're a finite resource yourself. There's only so much that you can do. And it's interesting how that gets flipped upside down, and they quite often treat themselves as in a way that they wouldn't treat anything else. They think they can go on forever doing these things, which we can't, can we? We know. And if you don't take the time and take those breaks and take those reflections, life will serve some up for you in its own way, won't it? Out of the blue, when it's the most inconvenient as well.
I'm telling coaching clients, you can do this, you can block this out, you can do these certain things. They go, oh, I don't know if I can. These patients will get really angry if I don't see them, say, at this time. Well, if you have a heart attack tomorrow and you're out of action for the next 3 months because you needed major surgery and can't work for 3 months, they'll get over it. They'll go and see the other person that works in your business. I think it's the thing. It's the way we treat ourselves sometimes is so poorly, and then it affects our health, it affects our relationships and everything else. And I think that's why it's really important to associate with other people that have a mindset, or they just want to be a better podiatrist. They want to be a better business owner, which leads me on to why I want to get back on here again, not just because you're a top bloke, but the Foot and Ankle Show. I went to it in 2019, and I want to talk about how it's developed over the last 5 years or so. So what's been happening with the Foot and Ankle Show? And it's on the 4th and 5th of February 2025, if anyone wants to know.
In the great city of Liverpool. Yeah.
Great city of Liverpool, always warm.
Always warm. I mean, the sun always shines. What's my home city? I grew up there, so that's probably the biggest reason why. No, it's not the biggest reason we do it there. It's brilliant for conferences, really. It's so much culture. The venue's fantastic, and it's really accessible as well. But anyway, enough of that stuff. So what's been happening with it? Loads and loads. It's first came into thoughts as we created Osgo 9 years ago now. Osgo Healthcare created the Foot and Ankle Show because before I became a podiatrist, I used to run events, large dance events. So once you've run really large events, we used to get 3,000 people for these residential weekenders back in 2000, 2001, 2002. And once you've tasted that experience of putting on events like that,
Did you say dance events?
Yeah, Latin dance events. So it's a time when you're going to.
Sorry, I didn't know that. I did not know that about you. Okay.
Yeah. So before I became a podiatrist in my 20s, the story gets weirder, Tyson, if you're ready. I was a prison officer at the time, and I was involved in the salsa scene in quite a big way, and then ended up teaching and performing, and then starting to put on club nights, and then put on larger salsa congresses, we used to call them, and ended up hiring large holiday park on the east coast of England, and bringing in dancers and bands from New York, Los Angeles, all over Europe, and got 3,000 people to these residential weekend events where we'd have dancing till 5 in the morning. And it was a crazy time. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. It was a niche market that was exploding at the time. The internet had just come about, so you could market for free, and these events would sell out in 48 hours. And I thought I was wonderful at business. But really, it was a load of kind of fortunate circumstances.
You still do salsa dancing?
Sorry?
You still do salsa dancing?
No, so I stopped. I stopped really when I got married, which was, goodness me, 19 years ago, just because life gets busy and everything.
Usually it's the exact opposite. You get married and your wife wants you to dance all the time.
No, I never did.
Yeah.
How we met actually was through dancing. She came to one of my events. Yeah. So yeah, danced occasionally at weddings or stuff like that. It would be a bit of it then. And then about 2 years ago it was, I went back onto the salsa scene for a few nights out, and it was brilliant, except my body is much older than it was. Yeah. So I paid the price, because actually when one of these fitness tracker watches, it was on while I was dancing all right. And for 4 hours, my heart rate didn't drop below 160 beats a minute, which is worse than running a marathon for me for 4 hours. So it was, no wonder I couldn't walk the next day, because the mind still thought I was a 25-year-old young man, but the body isn't. The body's much older than that now. So yeah, that was an experience.
So doing those events is what gave you the confidence to think, I think I can put on a podiatry event.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not necessarily the confidence to do it, but I think seeing what that did for that scene, bringing people together, it's the magic sauce. It really is. Getting people together in a room with a shared interest and facilitate them having a great time and breaking down barriers and interrupting their normal patterns of behavior. It just leads to incredible things and incredible experiences. That's what I wanted to bring to the world of podiatry. And that was the vision for what we started with Osgo Live, which was a smaller scale conference, which we then ramped up to create the Foot and Ankle Show, which has now been running for 5 years now. So that was the original mission, really, was to create that space where things could happen. I say things happen, that's a really loose term, isn't it? Where people could meet each other and people could inspire each other, people could share. Because part of my theory about the way I look at the whole profession of podiatry is, I suppose I view it like this kind of ecosystem. And I've always believed that we don't retain enough within the profession. I felt that certainly in the UK, we've not been particularly good at retaining within the profession. An example being a private practice would open, it would be an owner-operator, the practice would run. If the owner then were to retire, they might perhaps sell on the practice and their patient list. But the tangible assets in terms of systemization, the knowledge, the development, the actual premises, those things didn't mimic what happened in the world of dentistry, where a dentist would sell on the practice and the practice would just continue to grow and move on. And you would always have this cycle and retention within the profession. And I felt what was happening a lot, certainly in the world of private practice in the UK, was private practice was really at risk of being a leakage from podiatry, because the time we weren't really facilitating the education of undergrad students. We weren't attracting the undergrad students in because we weren't taking the product from the universities. They were usually going into the NHS. There wasn't necessarily the scope for career development of employing podiatrists in private practice back then. So I often saw private practices as perhaps being a potential leakage rather than retaining and reinvesting back into the world of podiatry and elevating podiatry to what I always thought it should be.
In the UK, so a lot of people graduate, go to the NHS, and they'd move from the NHS to private practice, and then from private practice, they would leak out of the profession.
So I think historically that was probably something that was happening quite a lot. I think also, I don't think podiatry private practice always shouldered its burden of responsibility for the profession. And I'm not laying the blame at anyone for that. I think that was just the reality of it. I think the NHS always provided the placements for the undergrad students. That's changed now, which is amazing. It's brilliant. And I think quite often the reinvestment in equipment and more sophisticated practices and levels of staff and marketing and infrastructure and all of those things wasn't what it could have been. It's entirely different these days. It's fantastic. It really is growing in strength in the world of private practice in the UK. And I'd like to think that certainly through Osgo and through the Foot and Ankle Show, we assist that and facilitate and make that kind of more achievable for people. And that was always the drive and the aim of doing it. So yeah, back to the kind of original point I was trying to make. I'm terrible for this type of
I know. This is what the whole podcast is all about, going off on a tangent and coming back again.
So the idea was bringing together these different people with specialist clinical knowledge, people with specialist business knowledge, people who've walked very different paths, people who are just inspirational, people who are at the beginning, people who are at the end, people in academia, people who've been through some traumatic experiences, people who've been really fortunate and got some experiences they want to share with the rest. And I wanted the stories to be shared. I wanted people to be able to look in different directions. I wanted the entire industry as well, all of the trade. I wanted them to not be considered as the trade, because the trade are the ones who make the products and services that we use, and they have so much knowledge and expertise in their products which have been developed for our market. I used to think, goodness, why don't we have these people presenting? Why don't we have these people much more integrated in these events? Because
it makes sense.
We're all playing the same game. We're all playing the same game. We're all interested in great patient outcomes. We're all interested in the industry growing and becoming stronger. We're all on the same team with that. And I think I used to look at a lot of conferences and events and see these divides. I'd see these divides between the academics, between any kind of regulation or regulatory bodies, between the trade, between the people working in the National Health Service and the people working in private practice and the students. And they would all be in these different cohorts and little boxes, really. And I used to think there's not enough mixing going on here, because we all work with each other through our professions, and there's so much getting lost that we need to find some way to bring this together into much more of a mix and facilitate that, and just start getting those connections happening in a way that get people to just have a different view of where they are. So like we were talking about before, day to day, you're fighting through your clinical caseload, and yeah, you mix with other podiatrists perhaps who are also fighting through their clinical caseload on a day-to-day basis, which may well look very much like yours. But if we can really break down those behaviors and have those pattern interrupts so that people find themselves sat next to someone from an entirely different perspective, or listening to someone else who's presenting something that they've never even considered before or come across in the profession, then that's what we wanted to do.
I always found, no matter what conference I've ever gone to, whether it's been in podiatry or out of podiatry, I always come away meeting someone really cool and learning something from them. When you're at the event, yes, you listen to people on stage. I always take plenty of notes, but it's the people you talk to in and around the trade displays and outside when you're getting a coffee or a beer at the bar. It's those conversations. And then they'll talk about, oh, did you see this speaker? And you might have been doing something else at the time. Yeah, it's just invaluable, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's self-selecting. The motivated individuals come to conferences, don't they? They are the people who are there given to share and who want to make those connections and help other people make connections as well. But yeah, there's just something that magic that happens at them, because through Osgo, we do a number of different activities, and we do a digital foot and ankle show. The largest one, we get 3,000 people logging on the same weekend to watch the talks and presentations. And it's wonderful. People are getting all this education. They're getting it wherever they are in the world at any time. It's fantastic. It doesn't have that magic of people being in the same room together, or having a drink afterwards, or perhaps going for a walk together, or seeing something, or being in the moment and something hilarious happening, or sharing a story that's meaningful to them. That really is the elements of magic that happen when you bring people together.
Yeah, I remember Dave Cashley in 2019. He did a talk on some neuroma research he was doing at the time, and saw him do the talk on stage, which I really enjoyed. He cracked a really good joke at the end. And then when he came out, I started to talk to him, and it was through that conversation I said, I'd love to get you to come on the podcast and talk further about it. If I hadn't been there live, I may still have been able to get him to come on the podcast, but there was a better connection because I'd met him live, met him at the conference. This is why I encourage people to go along. And if there's any Australians listening to this, it's a great excuse to go over to the UK for a holiday and go to the Foot and Ankle Show at the same time, meet a whole pile of really cool podiatrists over there, and then have a bit of a holiday at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And a number do every year. We always get people over from Australia, New Zealand. And I mean, this year we're getting people from,
Or even the United States, it's just down the road. It's not
the
far.
States, Iceland. I think we've got 17 delegates coming from Iceland, which
Oh,
is,
right.
yeah, that's like an official representation, isn't it?
Well, I've
17
never
from,
had anyone from Iceland on the podcast. So I'm going to hunt down some Icelandians and
yeah,
get them on the podcast.
yeah, absolutely. And that genuinely excites me is the global reach that we're getting with it now. That's fantastic. It really is.
So what's changed over the 5 years? Like I was there on the first one, 2019. What do you think have been the biggest changes over that 5 year period?
No longer making it up, I think, is the biggest change. Because, well,
I did the world's biggest selfie when I was up on stage. I remember
yeah,
getting up there and I got up on stage and I looked behind me, there's like 1,000 people.
yeah,
And I just went, oh my God, that's a lot of people. I said, okay, I'm going to do a selfie. And I loved it when I had the thing up there and I said, okay, can you just lean in a little bit on the left? And I saw the whole crowd move across a little bit on the left,
yeah,
and which I thought was hilarious. It's one of my
yeah,
favorite
yeah, yeah,
photos.
yeah. Surreal, isn't it? It was, yeah. So that very first one. No, I'm teasing a little when I say making it up, but that's what you do when you create something new. It's a best guess. So in your head, you design something and you think this is my best guess. And when you're doing the first one, there's a load of things which is a brilliant environment. The first thing is it can be whatever you want. So you don't have limitations apart from what's physically and financially possible. Number two, there's a lot of forgiveness around your first event.
Yeah.
People will come and accept. Number three, you're prepared to make mistakes because you're going to learn from it and you're going to refine and move forwards with it. So the first show, we made a guess as to what we thought it was. And I think we did pretty good with the
Well,
first
I
guess.
came away from the first one, came home.
Uh-huh.
My wife said, how was it? And I went, that was the best podiatry conference I'd ever been to. With the
Fantastic.
number of people. Like I'd been to some smaller ones in America with another group, and they were a lot of fun. Must admit, they put on a great show. But for the amount of people you had there, the amount of trade displays you had, the quality of the speakers, Barnum was the best couple of day podiatry event I'd ever been to, and that was your first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Fantastic.
I think you did really well.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you. So I think the lessons we learned from the first one were around certainly the way that we put it on is what's changed an enormous amount because that first one was run on blood, sweat, and tears. But we talk about what's the expendable at first. So we were every single decision we made was the first time we'd made that decision. So that
Yeah,
ate an enormous amount of time. So there was no system for putting on the conference. You're creating the system as you're actually putting on the conference, if that makes sense. One of the big things that changes over a period of time is we have a very refined system now of how we put on the foot and ankle show, which gets tweaked every year. The first year, you're doing the thing and writing the system ready for the next year. And then,
that's true.
so that does free up quite a lot of time, which then can go driven into certainly measuring, reflecting, and refining the actual show itself and the way that we do it, the way that we market it, the way that we engage with people, and also a huge amount of consideration as to the actual program. So what has changed enormously, I think, is the breadth of the program, and something we really learned from it is the breadth of the program is what matters. That's the feedback we get, and that's what people feel it's been a great event, is the sheer diversity of what's on offer from the speakers, subjects being as varied as possible, and finding those individuals. So I think we've become, the team are amazing at finding these individuals who've got something that is more than worth sharing. It's something that is going to move people and make a
Yeah.
difference. We changed the layout with the stage, so we run 3 stages now in the hall. So we're still
Oh, so it's
the
not
original,
one big stage anymore. So it's three
no,
running at the same time.
3 running at the same time in the one hall. So the original concept, I always wanted the stage in the hall. I didn't want it separate. I wanted everyone in that same pot all of the time, so
Yeah.
people could join in and out of talks, so that no one felt excluded. So the trade went sat there with no one around them when everyone was off in the talks. I
Yeah.
wanted it
And that's
flowing.
what happens usually at like some of the
Yeah.
conferences in Australia. All the trade
Mhm.
display are in one area, everyone goes off to the lectures, then all the trade people sit around and drink a coffee, or towards the afternoon, someone brings beers, and they can't wait for the day to end because they're not involved in anything.
Absolutely, which affects their mood, affects what they bring to the party. Yeah. It's not a positive. And I know when we first set this up, there was a huge amount of people who were like, oh, I don't like that. It's not a good idea. And the feedback from it actually happening, though, is that people overwhelmingly prefer that kind of setup. Also, the length of the talks, there's really tight timings on the talks. They're not long at all, forcing people to get to the punchlines, forcing people to get to the connections, and forcing people to get to the stuff that practitioners can go and make a difference on Monday morning in their practice if it's that kind of talk that's happening. So that was a big drive. We do way more workshops now than we ever used to, of demonstrating skills and updates and stuff. That stuff happens a lot. We still introduce the fun elements. They still work. I think something we did learn is that people being together in the room supplies 90% of the fun. They're having a great time being with each other in that environment. I think a lot of this starts from, this is right up your street, Tyson, I'm sure. It starts from the tone you set with the brand. And I think what we've really learned is our communication style and our voice from the get-go, from any emails you get from us, anything you find on the website, it sets the tone as to how it is. This is about people having great education, a great time, great connections, and bringing people together and a place of optimism. That's what it's about. And that the original branding conveys that really well. And then we run quite a lot of control on the brand to make sure that the whole event does fit with that as well, because people's experience while they're there is probably what matters most, I think, is what we've learned from it. So making sure that that kind of message does carry through. Of course, that's always the intent, and you don't achieve that 100% of the time with 100% of people. You just can't, but that's the intent, and that's what the team bend over backwards to try to achieve for people.
Has it been the same numbers over the 5-year period, or has it grown, or is it?
No, we had this thing called COVID, didn't we? Which
that's right. I forgot about that.
A bit of an interruption, really. So that was a terrifying moment. Oh, it was for all of us, wasn't it? For all of our business. So we're in a position where we have contracted to venues, contracted to shell schemes, contracted to carpet, contracted to enormous amounts of suppliers to make a conference happen. You have exhibitors who contracted who want to come and exhibit, and you have delegates who have tickets who then can't come to an event. So that was a challenging time navigating that, and navigating coming back out of COVID. We were one of the very first conferences to come back.
Did you do it in 2020 when COVID was on?
2021 it pushed back to. So as the restrictions were being loosened, it's really difficult to remember that timeline, isn't it?
I know in 2019 when I was there, it was September, October that it was on the first one. It was October, because I went from there and I went to the United States straight afterwards.
Yeah.
And now it's in February. So
yes.
So you must have gone February 21 then, and it's from there.
Yes, I think it was. I may be wrong on that. I'd have to check, but I think you're right. I think that's what happened.
Hey, let's not let the facts get in the way of a good story.
No, absolutely. Well, the first one back anyway. So social distancing was still an enormous thing. So the pivot we made to make people feel as safe as they could, because people were genuinely fearful about getting back out and mixing again. We took on 2 halls and we expanded the size of the conference, which was great for social distancing, which was a problem for creating atmosphere, because suddenly when you've got that amount of people and they're diluted into twice the space, it doesn't have the same buzz feel. And also the numbers reduce anyway, because through COVID, a lot of the profession didn't re-engage for quite a period of time. So then after that, there was a couple of years of rebuilding. Last year was our best attended event. So February 24 was our best attended event. And certainly all the feedback we got was that it's the best event we've done. This year, sales are certainly up on ticket numbers. We're looking at an increase of kind of 15% as to where we'd expect to be from February of this year. So it's really pleasing and going really well. But we want to keep reaching people, and we want them to come and experience it, because those who do come and experience it, the vast majority they love it, they get so much from it, and they come back and they bring someone else with them usually, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, I've raved about it since 2019. I've told so many people, if you're free during that period of time, whenever it's on, like in 25, it'll be February, just make the effort to go along. I said, it will blow your mind how good it is. But it's just, and I always encourage people that it's just having podiatry friends overseas and in different countries.
Yeah.
It's a unique experience. And the world is so small because of social media and the internet.
Yeah.
The world is very small. So once you have these connections with people, like one of my coaching clients was going to Scotland for a few days. And I said, oh, I know 5 podiatrists in Scotland that I met the last time I was
Yeah.
at the Foot and Ankle Show. So I put her in touch with them.
Yeah.
They're all sending messages to each other. Now, I'm not sure if they caught up or not, but
Yeah.
at least they communicated, and there's now that connection between them. And I think that's what will strengthen our profession. Yes, it might be a 24, 30-hour flight, but once you get there, it's worth the time and effort of doing it.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I think certainly the global connections matter in podiatry. Because the world is shrinking, isn't it? The information, it's you think about the information you receive on a daily basis now, it's no longer local, is it? Your news is global, isn't it?
Yeah.
The news feed that we have, it is global. We have much more awareness of what's happening in world politics than we ever did. We're so exposed to things globally. Cultural changes, fashion changes, economic changes. Things are becoming very global, aren't they? They just are. And as much as I say it's really important in the UK here that we all connect, it's not just a local thing. There's so much to learn as well from how podiatry is developed in different countries and people's approaches to stuff. And there's so much that we're potentially leaving on the table that's already been done, been built, been understood, and is within a culture of profession that we need to get those things connected as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I've found that even when I'm doing the podcast, and I've had podiatrists from Mauritius, the UAE, from Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, it's all over the place. And the more podiatrists, every time I get someone from another country that hasn't been on before, you sort of go, this is really cool. Singapore, as soon as they come on, it just makes, I think the other podiatrists sort of realize, okay, we're a lot more global than what we think. It's not just a couple of countries where podiatry exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how's the 3 stages work? You've got 3 stages running at one time. How do you work out who's talking where? Because like I'm going to be talking at the Foot and Ankle Show. Mine is happiness and achievement are independent variables. And I'm really looking forward to this talk. So how do you work out who's going to be, like when I'm talking, how do you work out who's going to be on the other stages? Hopefully they're not really good speakers, because I'll be standing there in an empty room.
Do you know, this is the common complaint we get is, I don't want to choose, I want to see all 3. There's something in that magic though of knowing that there's other great stuff going on at the same time as you having a great experience with whatever you're doing. And we want people to genuinely have great choices for every session.
Just don't put Jonathan Small on at the same time I'm on, because I want to watch his talk.
I'm not sure. I don't schedule it. No, I'm sure that clash won't happen. So yeah, there will be an app released which will have the timetables on, and then outside each of these stages, there is a menu of what times the talks are on, and everyone gets a brochure anyway, which has the program on and talk. And they're literally 50 meters from each other. You could even dip in one talk and think, no, I really should be sat listening to Tyson, and you can dip out and go across and listen into yours. So they're all very open and accessible in the same way. And
they're also recorded, aren't they?
We have done in the past. We don't record them anymore now because, and again, this is a technical thing. So we do the Foot and Ankle Show digital. And again, this is all about systemization, as you'll know with a business, is what works best. And for us to make the Foot and Ankle Show digital really accessible, we have a system of working where people pre-record their own talks, and we find it works a lot better for working with the PowerPoint presentation.
And can I just point out with the digital one, because I've done a couple now, some of us follow the rules and guidelines and some don't.
This is true.
So anyone who's listening to this who has spoken at the on the digital show, there is a set of guidelines that they send to you telling you how they want the recorded, where they want you to stand, the record, and everything else. Can you please read it? Because it'll make it much easier when people are watching the recordings. You actually follow the guidelines.
Yeah, these are one of life's challenges, aren't they?
Just read the instructions.
It is a challenge. And again, this is the key, because when we very first did one, I don't think we sent guidelines, and you'd be amazed at what people will send to you, not
Yeah.
knowing what you want really. The quality and consistency definitely has improved. We produce guidelines and we assist with stuff, but yeah, sometimes the team they'll get some videos and they're like, I'm going
Yeah,
to work
I
with this.
did. Yeah, I did. When I did mine this year, the quality of the video was better
Uh-huh.
because I had a different video camera, except I asked if they wanted me to redo it because I move a lot when I talk. So the camera
Yeah.
kept moving with me and it was
Yeah.
irritating me
Yeah.
when I was watching recording back, and I went, so I sent it off and said, look, if you want me to redo it, just tell me. They went, nah, it'll be fine. So
Yeah.
anyone that saw
Yeah.
mine, if I moved a lot, sorry about that. Next time I'll get that fixed up.
I know, I'm sure it was great. I'm sure Lucy enjoyed editing it anyway. Give her a challenge.
So it's not recorded anymore. So you're not doing video recordings of the actual talks?
No, the actual talks won't be recorded. And again, it's kind of belief on the event for me. I think there's a magic in having it as a live event and knowing it's
Yeah.
there. Yeah, it's not going to be something that's then. And maybe in time it'll make sense to do that. But at the moment, I think certainly as a drive back to live events. And I don't know about you, but when I'm talking at events these days, I always say to everyone, look, put your phones away. Don't be taking pictures of the presentation. I'll email it to you, but
Yeah.
just be present. Just be present. Just actually listen to what I've got to say and shout out, ask me questions, heckle, but don't just
I
hold
love
the camera.
heckles. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a disconnect there with the screen, isn't there? Which does change people's experience. So for me, I think a real drive towards having that magic in the moment of people there is what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah. I think sometimes people take photos of the slide, especially if the person presenting it is doing death by PowerPoint, where
Yes.
they'll have a slide up for 15 points and they're just reading from the slide. And they're not telling stories, bringing the personality into it. And you're just using the slide as a timing thing on when to move on to the next story.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just a slide with information, I think that's where people tend to take photos. They go, well, now I don't have to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just, the information's up there.
But the thing is, I don't know if you've ever done it, if you've ever taken a photo of a slide. You never go back and look at the thing, do you? It's just there in your camera phone, isn't it? It never sees the light of day again, does it? And
Something you're showing people the baby photos and go, yeah. Oh, and here's this slide that I took a photo of.
yeah,
Here's another one.
yeah, absolutely. But the real opportunity for that message to land and for you to internalize it in context, it's gone.
Yeah.
And the memory that you will hold from that, it's gone. The way it would make you feel, the motivation to go and do something about it, it's gone. Yeah. So that's my belief anyway. I'm sure people have got different ideas, but yeah, that's certainly the way I try and shape things.
No, I think it's a good idea. So people will rotate around. So the trade display people, are they going to be, when was there last time? They were all around the outside, big stage in the middle. Now you've got 3 stages. Are they spread amongst the 3 stages?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 3 stages are set in against the walls, and the trade kind of flows right through. So there is trade surrounded everywhere. So it's more of a pattern interrupt than it used to be, which I think is important, because when you have too many straight lines and obvious places for things to go, you're not disrupting people's thinking. You're not creating little corners where people have conversations. So yeah, that's what we really do try and put in, is that it doesn't necessarily feel predictable in what happens there. And also making sure that we get the sound fields as good as we can, so that the sound is contained within each of the stages, so that people can have a great experience in them, and then also go and talk to the trade.
Yeah. So how many people are you expecting this year? Well, 2025?
As many as possible. So I think
What's the
many
capacity?
as possible. Yeah. So I think numbers are going to be up on from the first year. And I think, so when you look at the numbers, it depends. Conferences always count attendance in different ways. Most conferences count the attendance cumulatively. So if they have 500 on day 1, 500 on day 2, they'll say we have 1,000 delegates. So the
Yeah.
number comparisons are always really tricky to do. And then you'll have a couple of hundred people there with the trade. You'll have 50 speakers there. You'll have all the tech team. The first year we had about 1,000 people in the building. So yeah, the numbers are going to be in that ballpark. I'm always reluctant to commit, because you never know what happens with COVID or whatever. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of people there. Ticket sales are great. Trade stands are, I think they're like over 90% sold out now as well. We've got 40 speakers this year. We've got workshops on as well. So it's going to be a really busy event.
Yeah, well, I know because I mentioned to you, I'm doing my workshop the day before the foot and ankle
Yeah,
show, and it's sold out midway through
yeah,
November, which
fantastic.
my goal is, I said, oh, if I could sell this out before the end of the year, then I don't
Yeah.
have to worry about it January leading up to
Yeah.
the event. But having it sell out midway through
Oh,
November, I just went, that's great. And every person I know who's going to my workshop, the marketing workshop, are all going to the foot and ankle show. So,
yeah.
and I said that was the idea, is get them all fired up on the Monday and
Yeah.
then get them even more fired up on the Tuesday and Wednesday. Oh,
Yeah.
curiosity,
Yeah.
why Tuesday and Wednesday? How did those 2 days come up?
Yeah, and again, it's feedback and research and learning. Some people always want a weekend because they don't want to stop their work. Some people absolutely don't want a weekend because that's not work and it's time with the family. There's a mixture of things. Some people then preferred later in the week. Some people preferred earlier in the week. So we keep refining down, and we speak to more and more people, we find what works best for most people, and the ticket sales reflect that, because quite often practitioners will have their if they're working 4 days a week in private practice, they'll take the Friday off. It's quite a common thing to happen. So if you're doing a Thursday Friday conference or a Wednesday Thursday conference, they will want to leave quite early on the second day, which then it's not, you want people to stay around until the end of the conference, enjoy the whole thing. So the tweaks certainly help with that, of making sure that people come and do the whole conference, which rather than leaving early on the second day. And it just seems to work much better. I mean, we put the dates out a whole year in advance so that people know when it is and they can block it out of their diary. But it seems to be the most favoured days, really, is doing it kind of Tuesday, Wednesday.
I think it's a good idea because, like, especially in the UK, it's not hard to get around. The Monday you get to where you're going to go,
Yeah,
or if you happen to become my workshop, you travel on the Sunday. Then you got the
yeah,
Tuesday, Wednesday, the event. The Thursday,
yeah.
get back home, and if you really feel like working on Friday, then you can work on Friday if it makes you feel better. I think you should just take the week off and treat it as a bit of a holiday, and just, I
Absolutely,
always think, don't
absolutely.
rush away from conferences. The best people and the smartest people usually hang around an extra
Yeah,
day, and they're the ones you'll catch up with breakfast the next day. They're in no rush to go.
yeah.
To me, that's the goal of some of these conferences. And I will admit, I've seen ones that are on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I
Hmm.
feel sorry for the speakers on the Saturday because
Yeah,
a lot of people have just disappeared. They've gone, I've had
yeah.
enough, and they've gone.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the great things that we had with the opportunity with this, is we could be experimental. We could try different things, and we could look at these things and say what doesn't work across most conferences. And the weekend thing was one of them. People leaving early was one of them as well. It's like, what will work better? Why is no one doing it on a Tuesday, Wednesday? Why isn't that happening? And it's just
Yeah.
because, well, no one else is. That was the only reason, is no one else is doing it. They're always on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday is what happens. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be like that, does it? So we pulled it back slowly over time. I think we moved to Wednesday, Thursday, then we moved to Tuesday, Wednesday, because we didn't fully commit at first. We dipped a toe in and thought, what's going to happen? And it was better. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, the year just gone, it was better again. Yeah. So you just have to be brave and try, don't you? I think sometimes.
But I think even people traveling overseas, they can fly over on the weekend, have the day of
Hmm.
rest, do it the Tuesday, Wednesday, and
Yeah.
then have another couple of days free, and then fly back home again. So
Yeah.
they're still really only losing that week of work, and at the same
Yeah.
time tying in with a bit of a tax deductible holiday,
Yeah.
and and just enjoying themselves. What I'd love to do is get you on here each year
Yeah. Brilliant.
around this time, because by now you would have a lot of your speakers lined up.
Yeah.
So have you come on around this time each year and then talk about, okay, what's the lineup of speakers? So people who are still sitting on the fence, because like I
Yeah.
said, I love the event. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So the more I can sort of give it a push,
Yeah.
yeah, the better it is for the profession.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, I'd be delighted to do that. Yeah, I'm just hoping now you're not going to ask me the lineup of speakers, because I've not memorized the 40
No,
names.
no idea. I know a few. Oh, I know I'm speaking. I know Jonathan
Yeah,
Small will be speaking. I'm sure
yeah.
Dave James wouldn't let you put one on without him speaking.
No, we've got consultant orthopedic surgeons, we've got dermatologists, we've got podiatric surgeons, we've got motivational speakers, we've got sports and exercise consultants, we've got people from the trade, we've got people involved with like cosmetic treatments, we've got people involved in education, we've got people who look after people's health and wellness from a mental health perspective, we've got overseas academics. We've got radiologists, we've got business people, we've got
Yeah.
people who specializing in diagnostic ultrasound. We've got people made their whole careers around treating athletes and runners. But it's so diverse what's happening. And then we've got all of the workshops as well, which are happening. It's such a wide lineup, and the talks are fantastic as well. So what I would say to people, if you are interested, just go and have a look at footandankleshow.com. There's tons of information on there. Or sign up to the newsletter and you'll get the emails which will tell you about all of the talks that are happening there and everything that's going to be going on.
So all they're going to do is go to footandankleshow.com. I'll have that in the show notes as well. Any final words before we wrap up?
Thank you for having me back. It's been a pleasure. And I think actually this conversation, we've not gone off on as many tangents as we usually do, which is we only touched on salsa dancing, didn't we? Normally,
yes. Before we got in here and I pressed record, we went off on a million tangents talking about different things. So I think we got that all out of our system before I pressed record.
Podiatry stuff, didn't we? Which is good.
Okay, Tony, I want to thank you for coming back on, talking about the Foot and Ankle Show. And anyone who's listening to this, I tell you, like I said, I've been before. I'm going to be there again in 2025. Probably the best podiatry event I've been to in the world. So I just highly recommend going along. So, Tony, thank you for coming back on here.
No, thank you very much. And I'm going to use that soundbite as a testimonial on our marketing, the best podiatry conference.
You can. Okay, thanks for that.
Cheers.